Welcome to the Psychologies Magazine podcast channel. In this podcast, Psychologies editor Susie Greaves talks to the incredible Brené Brown about her new book, Braving the Wilderness, the quest for true belonging and the courage to stand alone.
I am delighted to be here with the wonderful Brené Brown, author, brilliant inspiration, and all-down great person. She's been one of my inspirations, Brené, for a long time. I've read all your books, but I particularly love Braving the Wilderness. It's a wonderful book and something that I think touched my heart more than many of your other books because you touch on loneliness. And when I read your book, I thought, actually, I have been quite lonely at different parts of my life. And I realized I'd never really spoken to anyone about that. And I just wanted to start off our lovely podcast together about talking about loneliness. So I know you touch on it on the book. So how would you define loneliness? And how can we use this as an invitation to reach out and connect rather than sort of close down?
You know, I think when I started this research and I started thinking about kind of the big aha in the data for me, and this is not just data in the U.S., but globally, that as we become more politically, ideologically, culturally sorted into groups, as we become more insistent on hanging out with, going to school with, worshiping people who believe like us and think like us, you know, my assumption was, well, you know, I guess it's probably not a good thing that we're sorting ourselves into these factions, but I guess the upside is that we'll be more connected. And while we'll be more connected, you know, on, you know, around big issues, and that will cause that will cause problems, at least there's going to be deeper connection. But what was so startling to me is the more we sort ourselves into factions, the lonelier we become. So at the very same time that ideological sorting is happening, we're getting increasingly lonelier. And in fact, it's been really interesting, especially if you look at the research coming out of the UK. Some of the biggest research studies are about loneliness in the UK. And I think some of the first social scientists that started calling loneliness an epidemic were those studying loneliness in Great Britain. And so the definition is really important because I look a lot in this area to the research by John Cacioppo of the University of Chicago, who I think he's on his 25th or 26th year studying loneliness very specifically. And his definition is very straightforward. It's perceived social isolation. That loneliness is we perceive or we believe that we are isolated, that we are disconnected from other people. And he has really, I have to say, of all the researchers that I've leaned into across the years, doing my own research and work, some of his stuff turned my understanding upside down in a jarring way, because one of the things that we learn, you know, one of the things he taught me, I guess I would say, is that we are a social species. That humans as a social species depend on each other. We need each other. If you think about a newborn, you know, if you walk away from that newborn for extended periods of time, that newborn dies. That we are a social species, and that loneliness is a warning sign to us that we are in danger. And he said, much like hunger is we need food, or, you know, we need food and sustenance. Thirst is we need to drink. And loneliness is we need social connection, and we're in trouble.
Yeah. And I think it's astonishing, isn't it? I mean, I was just looking at the research just before I came on the call, and I was looking at a report that's saying 43% of, it's not, because I always think loneliness is kind of old people. You know, that's a kind of cliche. But
oh, yeah, I think that's the picture.
Yeah, but this report was saying 43% of 17 to 25-year-olds are reporting feeling isolated. Which is, you know, the young ones, you know, who seem to be, they've got everything ahead of them, and they are feeling isolated and disconnected, which is horrific, really horrific, and because of what that does to us. Because the research is saying that it's as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, feeling lonely.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look, there was a study done by Julianne Holt-Lunstead, Timothy Smith, and Bradley Layton, and they looked at kind of a big meta-analysis of different studies done on loneliness, and what they found is that living with air pollution increases our odds of dying early by 5%. Living with obesity increases our odds of dying early by 20%. Excessive drinking, 30%. Living with loneliness increases our odds of dying early by 45%.
Wow. That's incredible. That's an incredible statistic.
Yeah, and I think to combat loneliness, we have to first understand how to identify it and be courageous enough to understand that when we think, oh, this is what I'm feeling, and name it, this is loneliness, that we see it as a warning sign, not a pathology wrong with us, but a warning sign that we need increased social connection. And the research on that is really promising. It's not like, hey, I'm lonely, therefore I must go find a gaggle of friends and, my life needs to look like a beer commercial, where I'm surrounded by, lots of great-looking people and matching, jumpers and scarves, and we're high-fiving each other in slow motion. Like, that's not true. It's like a single person. It's, the studies on someone who plays cards with friends once a week or goes to a coffee shop once a week to meet someone. We don't need a posse or a crew. We just need one person or two people in our lives with whom we can connect and really feel genuine social connection.
Sure. So I really want to get quite practical with you, because this is idea of how do we do this? So I know you talk a lot in the book about this idea of belonging and fitting in and speaking your truth. So I know for many of us at school, we all wanted to fit in. We'd wear the same clothes. I've got a Charlie, my son, he's 14 and he's wearing the same clothes as all of his friends and he's striving to fit in. And you make this wonderful, you did an interview with some 8th graders, and you wrote about it in the book, and they made a great distinction between belonging and fitting in. Tell me a little bit about that, and then talk me through about what we need to do to truly belong versus fit in.
For me, I was really surprised going all the way back to the Gifts of Imperfection, which was, I guess 10, is that 10 years already? No. 8 years maybe. And really looking at belonging for the first time then and understanding that the biggest barrier to belonging is fitting in. And it seems so counterintuitive, but belonging is about being who you are and feeling a sense of social connection with people. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and changing who you are to gain acceptance. Yeah. And I always forget that you and I have very close Charlies, because I've got a Charlie who's 12 and you've got your Charlie 14. Yeah. And so they're in the middle of that middle school kind of angst. And so many years ago, and this was probably 10 or 12 years ago, I did some focus groups with middle schoolers and said, and this is when the research was first emerging in my data about the difference between fitting in and belonging, and I thought, that just kind of sounds unbelievable to me as someone who's an expert fitter-inner and has spent my whole life, honing the skill of assessing situations and figuring out who I need to be, how I need to act, what I need to wear, what I need to not say or say. I was like, this is the worst. This is just terrible. I need fitting in to be belonging. And so I thought, well, if there's one group of people who will know, it's not social scientists, it's middle schoolers. So I sat down with a group of 8th graders, which in the U.S. would be probably 13 or 14-year-olds. Yeah. Or 13 and 14-year-old teenagers, early teens. And we broke into small teams, and I said, I want each team your challenge is one thing. Is there a difference between fitting in and belonging? And if there is a difference, what is the difference? And so they started sharing their answers by team. And so, one team said, belonging is being somewhere where you want to be, and they want you. Fitting in is being somewhere you want to be, but they don't care one way or the other.
That makes me cry.
I know. Another team said, belonging is being accepted for you. Fitting in is being accepted for being like everyone else.
Yeah.
And then the last one was the one that I just carry on my heart. This is the one that I'm like, every time I'm having a conversation with, my daughter's first year at university, Charlie's 12, they're both navigating this. And so this last team reported in and said, if I get to be me, I belong. If I have to be like you, I'm fitting in.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And
it's just they're brilliant, right? Because this is the currency of their realm.
So what messages can we give to our kids as parents about this idea of fitting in versus belonging? What are some great messages that we can start talking to our children about?
I think for me, you use the example, or I think a lot of parents are like, so if they want these special trainers, or if they want to, wear this jumper, or they want to do this, so we say, no, what do you want? And I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think if that's exciting to them and they don't, and that they want to look that way, you support it to a degree that you can, or that you feel is comfortable for your family, or not just financially, but just makes sense. I think that there are bigger issues. I think for parents, when something goes wrong, and it inevitably will, when they're not invited to a sleepover, or they don't get asked to, go to a party, or they're left out of something, I think sometimes our own fear can drive us to that very quick place of, what did you do, or what's wrong with you, or why don't they like you, or as opposed to just letting them talk about their feelings, asking how you can be supportive. And the most powerful thing you can do, and my husband and I talk about this all the time because he's a pediatrician, so this is very much his area, but if you can tell your kids a story of a time in your life when you were close to their age and experienced something similar, it's so helpful for them to understand that they're not the only one, especially tweens and teens, 11 through really 17, nothing feels normal. Their bodies are crazy, their hormones are crazy, their hair is crazy, their friends' problems are happening all the time. Just to be able to listen to them, normalize, and help them work through it, as opposed to going right to our own fear of, what did you do that they didn't want you?
Sure.
And I think one of the things, as my daughter's gotten older, I've been able to really say, you can be whoever you want to be in order to get accepted into this group, or to be asked to hang out or sit at this lunch table. But just understand that if you change who you are in order for them to like you or want you, that is a hustle that you have to keep up forever, lest you risk being pushed away. So the big question is, pretending is not a one-time thing. And if you feel a sense like, oh, they really like me, but you're not being yourself, that is actually the loneliest feeling in the world. And most of us know it. I certainly know it.
Yeah. Well, I think, I said we're talking about the kids here, but your book will resonate with so many, obviously, adults. These habits that we have to fit in, and you talked about perfecting, pleasing, proving, pretending, all of these ways that we try to fit in. And as you say, throughout my 20s, I'm so skilled at that. I knew how to do that, but I was so unhappy and so disconnected from myself. And I've slowly got back on track with lots of therapy, and I'm more connected with myself than I've ever been, at the age of 50. But when you start to realize, you'll read your book and you start to realize, oh my God, that's why I feel so lonely. I'm so disconnected. Where do we start to connect to ourselves again? How do we connect to that place? Well, we've had these habits going forever. Where's the place to start? Where can I say, okay, this is not working for me anymore?
It's interesting because not all of us, but most of us have one person or two people who see the real us and who we can be real in front of. We just don't value that relationship. So it's like, it's the Groucho Marx. I don't want to be a member of a club that would let me in. And so, I'll ask Steve, like, what do you think about this outfit? Because I'm going to go give a big talk to 5,000 people, and he'll say, oh, I think you look great. I love that. I love those jeans and cute shirt. You look great. And I'm like, why am I asking you? What you think doesn't matter. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, because you love me and like, you know, we're in the long haul together. So what you think doesn't matter. He's like, because the strangers that you're going to see for 60 minutes, that's what's important. I'm like, exactly. Now you get it. And so I think it's about the return to ourselves. It is a solitary journey, but it's also about thinking about who do we spend time with that meets our needs for social connection, but also we are our total selves. And then when we put value on ourselves, we start to reassign value to those relationships. And I think, you know, at your 20s, I think I got to a point in my 20s when I knew what the people I was hanging out with, I knew them better than I knew me. I knew what they liked to listen to more than I knew what music I liked. And I think part of it is just because we're a social species and we need connection doesn't mean that we don't also need alone time. And some of us, I mean, for example, I'm a very introverted person, so I need a lot of alone time. But I think spending time with ourselves and understanding what is it that's joyful for us, what is it that we really love, if we step back. And that's why a lot of people get to this after a crisis, because after a crisis, resources are very limited. And we're like, hell no, I can't spend time on that. It just feels like bullshit. I'm not doing it. But we can skip the crisis part. I mean, we can't. None of us can skip the crisis part because we will all have our fair share. But we can also engage in this process through just a commitment. I think journaling is incredibly helpful. I probably could not have done it without a therapist, just because my expertise was so. I became such an expert at being who people wanted me to be that I really could not find my way out of that forest.
Yes.
Like I really just needed someone calling BS constantly.
Yeah. That's been my experience too. Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of professional help. Okay, so brilliant. So personally, you know, there's a place for us to be brave, to start looking about how we can authentically be ourselves and connect with other people, showing people who we really are. I just want to talk now about the bigger world, because your book has something really, really wonderful to say about, some really wisdom around the language we can use. So we've had Brexit in the UK, and you've got Trump, and what's happened is you talk a lot about the kind of polarization of these groups, as you said at the beginning of our podcast. And what is happening, and you talked about this thing, if you're not with me, you're the enemy. And I shared with you earlier, as when Brexit happened, my friend told me what she'd voted, and I was so appalled, I nearly pushed her into the lake. I was literally, I had this rage, and I was like, I cannot believe you voted that way. Oh my God. And I was so shocked at my own reactions. And it's been up and down the country. You know, families are falling out. Families are not talking to each other. So you talk about it and you write about it so beautifully in the book about this idea, if you're not with me, you're the enemy. So what steps can we take to really start listening to other people and hearing their opinions without attacking them or throwing them in the lake?
Yeah, and I think it's a hard question because we're still, we're still, every week is a new week for us. Every week there's a new lake pushing incident in our administration. So it's so ongoing here. And I think, and I think it's ongoing actually in the UK as well, because while Brexit was a single vote, I think the fallout from it just continues to unravel. So I think where it starts is this. I mean, that whole you're either with us or against us is in a chapter that's titled "Speak Truth to Bullshit and Be Civil." And I think one of the things we have to do is one of the biggest forms of BS, I think, in the world today. And there's a difference between BS and lying. Lying is, I know the truth and I'm intentionally disregarding it. BS is, I don't know the truth and I don't really care, but this is how I feel, so I'm going to make this the truth, which is a huge issue in politics in the U.S., right, and probably globally right now. So I think one of the biggest forms of BS, the proliferation of BS right now in the world, there's a couple of them causing it. The first thing is the more polarized we become, the less willing we are individually to say, I don't know, or I don't understand that issue fully, or I need to learn more about that. Most of us feel compelled to have a very solid, defended opinion on everything, even stuff we don't know about. And that drives BS because most of us don't know. I mean, I can't weigh in on everything from violence in the Congo to environmental problems in the Netherlands and Brexit. I can't be an expert on everything. But because we don't see people's differences today as political differences, but incomprehensible life decision differences. Like basically your decision to vote in a different way from me or support someone that I don't support is not just a difference in policy that we can debate. It is we have elevated it to you are dismissing my humanity by doing that, you know. And so the source of BS is really important. We all think we have to have an opinion that's informed on everything. When we don't have it, we make it up. The second thing is what you just mentioned is this argument, which we call it a false dichotomy or a false dilemma, that you're either with us or against us. So I'll be with my dad and I'll say, my dad will say, what do you think about this new immigration plan? And I'll say, well, Dad, I think it's really actually racist and not helpful. And he's like, come on, sis, now, this is what I think, and we've got to, really be thoughtful about this. And, I can't believe you're coming down on the side of, the terrorists. And I'm like, whoa, wait, what just happened? It's like, you're either with us in securing the safety of the United States or you're against. And this idea of you're either with us or against us, is huge in culture. Every movie with a villain has a villain at someone at some point saying whether it's like, Star Wars is a big theme in Star Wars, it's a big theme in all the movies. You're either with us or against us. And the truth is, I can look at my dad and say, you know what, Dad, that's actually not the case. I'm with you. I love you. I respect you. I'm not with you on this issue. I have a different opinion here. No, there's no time for neutrality here. I'm not saying that neutrality is a good thing, Dad. What I'm saying is there are actually 90 options between what you say and what I say. So the idea that you're either with me or against me is actually bullshit. That's actually false. Now, to my dad, saying it was BS, but to say there are 90 things in between that I'm still with you. But I'm against this idea. And it was just, I think one of the most famous instances in the United States of that was a couple of days following 9/11. Both Hillary Clinton and George W. Bush stood up in front of the American people and said, these are the actions we're taking. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. And the problem is that when it's he or she who frames the argument that holds all the power, and I'm not saying to fight with people around anything, but you don't get to own the frame. That I'm not buying the frame. Like let's forget even about the argument. I'm not buying the frame. I'm not buying that I either agree with what you say or I'm supporting people who are violently attacking innocent citizens. That is not the case. And the problem is that most of us get into lake pushing when we feel like people take a choice that we have or decision and frame it as we're really bad people with no morals or ethics or no love of country, no patriotism. I'm a very patriotic person. And I happen to believe that dissent is patriotic. But when you start calling into question our morals and our ethics and our love for country and other people, that's where things get messed up. So I think I did this interview with Michelle Buck, who teaches leadership and conflict transformation at Northwestern University in Chicago, in their business school. And it's the Kellogg Business School, and she's a very revered teacher. And I just love that she doesn't even call it conflict resolution. She calls it conflict transformation, because the goal is not to resolve the conflict. The goal is to take the conflict and transform it into an opportunity for us to understand each other better and for us to hear each other and grow more connected. And I think we can do that. But I do think we have to call truth to BS. I think we cannot allow other people to frame our beliefs.
I think challenging the frame is fantastic. There was a phrase that I'm going to use going forward that you wrote about called tell me what you know about it and what's important to you. So you can really hear, I thought that was such a great line because, again, for me, it's often trying to find the language, the vocabulary to start the discussion. And you just said I have a different opinion to that as well, that you can call it, you can say I don't agree with that, but it doesn't mean you have to attack the other person. So in terms of connecting with others,
right.
Yeah,
I think that's right,
yeah.
And I think that's why if you look at every chapter in Braving the Wilderness, everything feels very paradoxical. I mean, the chapter title is "Speak Truth to BS, but Be Civil." Strangers, people are hard to hate close up, so move in. And so I think the thing about speaking truth to BS and not letting people own the frame or saying, tell me why this is important, is that definition of civility that I share from the Civility in Government organization here in the U.S., which is civility is claiming and caring for one's identity, needs, and beliefs without degrading someone else's in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote that down and I put that on my board. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah. If you can't stand up for what you believe in and talk about what you believe in without tearing down someone else, you've got some skill building to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in terms of, we talked about the piece around one-to-one, about when we're feeling lonely, and you talked about it as a kind of a warning sign. I'd like to think of it as an invitation to reach out and connect. You talked about how we could do that. We talked about the bigger kind of global situation that's going on right now and how we're tearing each other down rather than listening and really hearing it, and then maybe trying to find some new ways to have that conversation, challenging the frame, using new vocabulary, really connecting. Just want to end with a couple of questions around, you talk about there's no substitute for face-to-face connection. We're all connected to social media, we're all on our screens all the time. Why are we so lonely? And I love this chapter that you wrote about this. Hold hands with strangers. It made me cry. The Harry Potter thing made me cry. Tell us about the Harry Potter piece.
Oh, yeah. It was just this idea of seeking moments of collective joy and collective pain, seeking moments where, we can be, the thing about what we're in right now, I believe politically, ideologically, is I really frame it up as a spiritual crisis. And I don't mean it's a religious crisis because, no pun intended, but God knows that religion has caused a lot of the problems. But a spiritual crisis in terms of us, if you look at spirituality across, if you look at every religion, every spiritual belief, what holds it all together is the deeply held belief that we're inextricably connected to each other by something bigger than us, that we are, that you and I, are thousands of miles in an ocean apart, but that we're connected to each other by our humanity. And I think it's easy to forget. You can't break the connection between human beings, but you can forget it. And I think men and women with the highest levels of both sense of belonging and courage seek out moments to be reminded of those moments of inextricable human connection. And so I talked about being in the Harry Potter, we're huge Harry Potter people, and my daughter is of the age that she read the books as they came out, and we saw the movies, in line at midnight, opening night. I was wearing, I think, a Gryffindor scarf and a Keep Calm and Carry a Wand T-shirt. And there was this scene where there was this devastating loss, and I've been told not to say the loss because new generations are reading the book and very upset by the spoiler alert in the book. But there was this devastating death. And in the film, the response to this death is all of the students at Hogwarts and all the teachers hold their wands to the sky, and a single point of light comes out of the wand to create this lightness that pushes away Voldemort, our villain. And in the theater in Houston, a million miles away from Hogwarts, during the movie, you looked up and every single person is crying and every person has their hand up as if they're holding a wand. And it was just this incredible moment of inextricable human connection. And I think that seeking those moments, whether it's music or, I remember one day Chris Anderson, who curates TED, sent this link out that said, when sport is religion, and I think it was 95,000 Liverpool fans in a stadium in Melbourne, Australia, singing You Will Never Walk Alone. These moments of human connection where we hold hands with, in Houston, our baseball team won the World Series, the Houston Astros. And I remember this moment, I was at one of the playoff games, and I stuck my hand into my husband's pocket, and I was kind of gave his butt a little squeeze. I'm like, this is so exciting. And I realized it wasn't even my husband, it was the guy standing next to me. But everyone, I was so embarrassed. He was like, wow, that was exciting. I was like, I'm sorry. But it was just high-fiving, and it was just those moments. And so holding hands with strangers, even during very difficult times, when a city comes together to mourn a loss, those are important moments.
And again, it's just that piece of sharing our shared humanity in those parts. It's about the connection. And it's we're all kind of into our screens. And in England, at the moment, there's lots of festivals, all of these festivals. Everywhere you look, there's another festival. And I think it's that we know to survive, we need to gather, we need to party, and we need to dance, and we need to sing, and we need to. So yeah, absolutely.
Let me just say this, and I know we're out of time, but I think this is a fun thing to end on. That the term Durkheim, the French sociologist, called those moments. He studied them across Europe. He called those moments collective effervescence.
Yeah,
and
lovely.
I just think that's so beautiful, and I think we need collective effervescence so that in those moments that are very difficult, we can have in our heart memories of, yes, we're connected to people. I'm connected to the Syrian refugee. You're connected to the American in California digging out from a mudslide right now. We're connected in a way that while it can be forgotten, it can never be severed.
Yeah. Brené, wonderful. What a wonderful place to end the interview. Thank you so much for your time today. I love your new book. I hope you're coming over to the UK soon and we can all come and see you. And Psychologies, we're such huge fans and our readers love you. When I said I was interviewing you tonight, everyone was so excited. We're all waiting for Brené, so I don't know.
I love it, and I am dying to get over there. So I'm hoping it'll be in 2018, and Psychologies will be a first stop.
Oh, all right. Lots of love. Thank you for writing your wonderful book.
Lots of love
to
you
too.
too.
See you soon.